Well, hello there, Space Monkeys. Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. We're going to continue with the book club today. Sorry it's been a while. I was sick for 8 days with the new COVID strain. Probably the sickest I've been in a decade. And the whole fam had it. And then I got banned off YouTube, which is what I'm dealing with right now. I'm suspended again for an old, reading again an article or a scientific study on ivermectin over a year ago. So I will release a cluster of new chapters from the book when I get back from suspension in 4 or 5 days. We're going to read Dreamland, page 124. This chapter is called Purdue. OxyContin is a simple pill. It contains only one drug, oxycodone, a painkiller that Germans synthesized in 1916 from thebaine, an opium derivative. Molecularly, oxycodone is similar to heroin. OxyContin riffed off an earlier Purdue product, MS-Contin. MS-Contin was Purdue's first foray into pain management using the Continus time-released formula invented by Knapp in England. MS-Contin set morphine into a patient's bloodstream continuously, hence Contin, over several hours. To accomplish this, MS-Contin came in large doses of morphine, 15, 30, 60, 100, and 200 milligrams. Purdue marketed it to cancer patients and people just out of surgery, and MS-Contin apparently served them well. Likewise, OxyContin contains large doses of oxycodone, 40 and 80 milligrams typically, wrapped up in a time-release formula that slowly sends the drug into the body over several hours. It has legitimate medical uses and has assuaged the pain of many Americans for whom life would otherwise be torture. But OxyContin came out in 1996, which was a very different time in American medicine than 1984, when MS-Contin appeared, or its story might have been similarly pedestrian. In the 1980s, few people in medicine accepted prescribing a strong opiate for chronic pain. By 96, however, the opiate revolution wrought by the pain crusaders had been changing minds in American medicine for a decade. More insurance companies were reimbursing for pills, but not for therapy that was not strictly medical. Pain was now considered a vital sign, measured by a subjective scale between 1 and 10 and treated aggressively. Later, Purdue officials would say that what happened with OxyContin surprised them because MS-Contin hadn't been abused. That wasn't entirely accurate. Detectives in Ohio I spoke to remember that MS-Contin was stolen and abused. Doctors were conned into prescribing it to drug addicts in some cities, but not others. In Cincinnati, but not in Columbus, for example. But certainly abuse of MS-Contin was sporadic and never hit the levels that its cousin OxyContin would attain. To promote OxyContin, Purdue hired William Douglas McAdams for the first time. While Arthur Sackler was alive, he didn't allow the firm to work for Purdue, said Win Gerson, then the president of the firm. But Sackler had died in 1987, and the ad firm now got the Purdue contract. In preparing OxyContin for sale, Purdue thought it was just an extension of MS-Contin, Gerson said. There was nothing that suggested in reading the data that 5 minutes after you marketed it, the kids would learn how to break it down. Gerson told me, Purdue followed the model of the drug they had, which was MS-Contin. They absolutely thought that OxyContin would not be addictive. But MS-Contin wasn't sold as a virtually risk-free panacea for chronic pain. Other opiate painkillers had been confined to small doses, and combined with acetaminophen or Tylenol to make them hard to liquefy and inject. These drugs were Vicodin, Lorcet, Lortab, Percocet, and others. Yet even those were abused. Moreover, no one had imagined that a pill containing a drug similar to heroin would be marketed almost like an over-the-counter drug. But by 1996, American physicians were tenderized into accepting opiates for chronic pain. Undertreated pain was an epidemic, and physicians now had the duty, the calling, to relieve it using the new tools and drugs the pharmaceutical companies were inventing. Indeed, some pain crusaders saw Purdue's continuous release mechanism as the holy grail that the Rockefeller Committee had sought, and that had eluded researchers testing drugs at the narcotic farm for decades. If a non-addictive drug couldn't be found, perhaps a new method for administering opiates would lead to less addiction. OxyContin theoretically parsed out oxycodone in a way that did not cause the intense highs and lows that caused addiction. This was an exciting possibility. All that testing at the narcotic farm in Lexington might not have been in vain after all. Science might finally have come up with a way to provide merciful pain relief without the torment of addiction, albeit not in the way that researchers originally imagined. We went from not having very potent drugs to an oral morphine form and to a pharmaceutical industry that wanted to promote it, Kathy Foley said in an oral history interview in 1996, the year OxyContin was released. So we, for the first time then, had a marketer and a distributor for a drug that we had an educator, and knew then that oral morphine was effective. We can get away from these silly elixirs and cocktails into tablets that people take once or twice a day, and we're in a revolutionary field of pain management. It was the drug delivery device that changed, not the drug, and with that, the whole mentality, well, now that we have this drug, we can treat pain. It's really extraordinary. This possibility was indeed extraordinary. Up to then, pain patients spent most of their day thinking about pain or the pills they needed every 2 to 4 hours to keep it at bay. Clock watching, as it was called. 2 OxyContin a day was better. That became the main selling point. The advantage was hardly trivial. 2 pills a day allowed a pain patient's life to recommence. FDA examiner Dr. Curtis Wright, supervisor of the agency's team that examined Purdue's application, thought OxyContin might well possess addictive side effects and thought its only benefit was to reduce the number of pills a patient had to take every day. Care should be taken to limit competitive promotion, Wright is quoted as writing an FDA report by the New York Times' Barry Meyer in his 2003 book on OxyContin called Painkiller. Wright later left the FDA to work for Purdue. In 1995, the FDA approved OxyContin for 10, 20, and 40 milligram pills. Later, it added 80 and 160 milligram pills. Despite the high doses of oxycodone loaded into each pill, the FDA bought the idea that by creating fewer surges of euphoria and depression, OxyContin would be less addictive. The Holy Grail at last. The FDA approved a unique warning label for OxyContin. It allowed Purdue to claim that OxyContin had led to lower potential for abuse than other oxycodone products because its time-release formula allowed for a delay in absorbing the drug. No other manufacturer of a Schedule II narcotic ever got the go-ahead from the FDA to make such a claim, Meyer wrote. It was a claim that soon became a cornerstone of the marketing of OxyContin. The warning label also inadvertently told addicts how to abuse the pill, warning patients not to crush the tablets because that would release a potentially toxic amount of the drug. Quote, that was like an invitation to a junkie. A 2003 U.S. GAO report on the company's OxyContin marketing efforts, requested by members of Congress, found that the FDA didn't realize that, quote, the drug could be dissolved in water and injected. From the start, Purdue promoted OxyContin far beyond the cancer and post-surgical patients to whom it was marketed MS-Contin. Purdue positioned OxyContin as the opiate of choice in the World Health Organization's ladder of pain management. The company aimed to convince doctors to aggressively treat non-cancer pain and prescribe OxyContin for moderate pain lasting more than just a few days. OxyContin ought to be used for bad backs, knee pain, tooth extraction, headaches, fibromyalgia, as well as football, hockey, and dirt bike injuries, broken bones, and of course after surgery. This was a vast new market for an opiate painkiller. U.S. back pain patients alone numbered some 35 million people. The total number of cancer patients were a fifth of that. And I'm a doctor who treats that, chiropractic, actually, without painkillers, just incidentally. To get there, Purdue had to answer doctors' first doubt. Isn't this stuff addictive? As Arthur Sackler had done with Valium in the 60s, Purdue set about promoting OxyContin as virtually risk-free and a solution to the problems patients presented doctors with every day. The company urged salespeople, meanwhile, to, quote, attach an emotional aspect to non-cancer pain so physicians treat it more seriously and aggressively. Many pain patients suffered badly. Purdue urged doctors to believe that Oxy was the drug to start with and stay with. The doctors needn't worry because the oxycodone was released slowly over many hours. Thus, OxyContin did not create the steep highs and lows that created cravings. This message went out mostly to primary care doctors whose sole pain management training was usually at medical conferences, listening to the pain crusaders who bore the news that opiates had, quote, been shown to be addictive in less than 1% of pain patients. A former Purdue sales manager of West Virginia, William Jergley, said that the company urged its salespeople to emphasize the safety of OxyContin. Jergley declined my request for an interview, but in 2003 he told the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, quote, "They told us to say things like, it is virtually non-addicting. That's what we were instructed to do. It's not right, but that's what they told us to say. You tell the doctor there's a study, but you wouldn't show it to him." In Painkiller, Barry Meyer describes at length Purdue's sales techniques and training. The company put its sales reps through several weeks of training. One question they addressed concerned the risk of addiction to pain patients when treated with narcotics. Quote, "The correct answer was less than 1%, Meyer wrote. So we'll start the next chapter tomorrow, The Man and the Nayarit. That's on page 128. Keep fighting that good fight, guys. Talk to you later.